Hi everyone and welcome to my presentation. I'm here today to share my research that I've called Acid Sacred, Acid Christians and their Enchantment of the Divine. But before moving in and knowing a little bit more about this topic, I have to say who am I and why I should speak to you about this topic. My name is Mirko Vercelli, I'm a cultural anthropologist and my research has been lately mainly focusing on embodied practices both as a therapeutic tool as an expressive artistic tool. And so my interest, both academic and personal, has brought me into these underground communities in Italy. For example, this picture comes from one of these laboratories, and what I found interesting in a lot of times there was this natural intersection, this natural blend of spiritual research and psychedelic experiences. So why should I be interested in this topic? Well, my main inspiration for this research is my main also philosophical framework is the theory of Max Weber or the disenchantment. What does it mean? Science nowadays has given an answer to everything in our life: death, love, and everything that appears around us. But it says that our thirst for transcendence, for something that goes beyond words, is still working underground, and today is surfacing again in different ways. We can see it everywhere around us, from these trends, growing trends of neo-shamanism, mindfulness, meditation, silent retreats, and also psychedelic renaissance. A lot of philosophers spoke about that in the past centuries, from Berman, Duran, Latour, Latouche, for giving you some examples. And now we will understand how and why spiritual thirst for transcendence, for something that goes beyond, and psychedelic renaissance goes together very well. But first, I need to say also another thing. I've worked mainly in Italy, first of all because I'm Italian, but also because I think it's very interesting to work with a country that has a strong cultural heritage of Christianism. In Italy, over 20 million people identify themselves as practicing Catholics. So, with this thirst growing of re-enchantment, it was a matter of time before psychedelics and spirituality, more precisely Christianism, would blend together and work together. The problem right now is that there is no legal, clinical, or more important for them, pastoral framework to validate their experience. I focused on my research mainly on mushrooms because I think it could work as a Trojan horse in their idea, in their framework of ideology. Since it's something that comes from the nature, it's easier to accept it and be more culturally acceptable. So, Italian philosophers right now, today's like Campagna and Mattei, spoke about re-enchantment as an answer to disenchantment, to the sufferings that science brings when we have everything explained, but yet we feel that something is missing. And they say that psychedelics can be a tool for that, they can be a taste of a re-enchanted mind. But what are the main key points of their ideas? I think we can summarize it as overcoming dualism, so breaking the barrier between the subject and the object, to feel again connected to the world around us and not like as something in the background. The rediscovery of wonder, pay attention how all these points are linked together, also consequential, inherently consequential. Restoring so dignity to our subjective experience and to give intrinsic value to the objects around us, to the life around us. And this is re-enchantment, and psychedelics can act as a tool, as a taste for the re-enchanted mind. And how does it work inside Christianism? To discover that, I use a kind of heterogeneous approach, using both questionnaire, in-depth qualitative interviews, but also fieldworks, participant observation during workshop, festival, rituals, and also ethnological web-based research on forum and communities. I have to recognize my limits. First of all, my personal interest in this topic, that for sure shaped my conclusion and my approach, and also that many of the people that I interviewed, then I had a strong personal relationship. So, before starting, I wanted to have a voice of a member of the church that could represent the idea of the Vatican. So I interviewed a very important presbyter, a priest that is a lecturer in spiritual theology, former regional coordinator of exorcists in Italy. So, someone that knows a little bit about transcendence for sure. The thing that I found most interesting from this interview was this phrase that I give you here by his own words, is that it is as in contemporary Christian theology we had forgotten a part of our own knowledge. Christian mysticism, the Via Mystica, has been reduced from the summit of Christian experience to, at best, one option among many. So we can understand how and why, by his own words, we also in Christian communities that should be active spiritual practicants, there is a thirst for transcendence. There is a thirst for something that goes beyond rational answers. It is because the institution itself has abandoned its own contemplative heritage. But it makes a strong distinction between these experiences. It says that there is a natural ecstasy and a supernatural ecstasy. The natural ecstasy is induced voluntarily by the practicant. It can be meditation, fasting, whatever. And it says it's a legit way of this kind of experience because it's a fruit of human effort that is allowed, but it says that it's not something spiritual. It can be a proper way to feel better, to feel good, to feel joy of life, and it's something that God allows, but it's not being touched with God itself, because the supernatural ecstasy has to be gifted from God. It cannot be induced voluntarily, and it's something passive and transformative. Yet, in this distinction, I find very interesting similarities. I took some examples from an ancient proto-Christian text that spoke about the stripping of all images and the loss of all concepts and ego, and the idea that the self dissolves into the all, and that after some steps made by the human, God takes control. So the substance takes control. And we still have, we can see in the psychedelic research nowadays, the concept of ego dissolution, the loss of the boundary between the self and the world, and we all know that it can be a very transformative experience. So, we have a little bit of precedence in this research, and not the first one, of course. The first, most famous, is the Walter Pank's one, the research of the Good Friday experiment. He was a scholar of the famous Timothy Leary, and he conducted this study, a very kind of a mid-scientific research, I would say, because it was highly controversial, but he gave psilocybin to 20 theology students and studied what happened, and they all had the complete mystical experience, and from their own words, completely identical to the experience described in the classical Christian text. There is a follow-up for this research conducted by Rick Doblin from the MAPS Association. 25 years after, he met the same person, most of them now are priests, and asked them about their experience. And for most of them, it was still one of the most important experiences in their spiritual and personal life. But moving to a more contemporary literature, we have this research by the Johns Hopkins University in which they gave psilocybin to several religious leaders, and what they discovered, I think it's rather interesting, because independently from their religions, they all had this greater sense of openness toward other ideas and a deepening sense of the sacred, so a stronger sense of their faith while still being open to the others, and I think that's very interesting. For my own research, during my interviews, I was able to differentiate the acid Christians in three main groups. The first one is the Christians that use psilocybin, and I find it interesting, but somehow hierarchically inferior to the God, to the mystical experience itself. So, by their own words, I tried mushrooms during Erasmus. It was intense, but today I see it as a taster compared to the authenticity of the experience in the spirit. Or, for example, now in shared prayer, I find states of consciousness that are far deeper and more meaningful. So we can see that they think that psychedelics can be interesting, but they recognize that they are still inferior. They're not part of the religion itself, so very similar to the idea of the priest that I interviewed. The second type is the syncretic integration one. The Christians, I think it's one of the most interesting, that use psychedelic as an active tool. Let's go again by their own words. I realize it's controversial, but I experience these things as part of Christianity. Since they are part of the created world, they helped me to overcome chronic depression and strengthened my relationship with God. Also, my spiritual practice integrates traditional prayer, meditation, and sacred session with psychedelics every 3 to 4 months. During these sessions, I pray and meditate on sacred texts. The revelation I receive are always in harmony with Christian teachings. I see them as sacred tools that, when used with respect and spiritual intention, can deepen one's faith. Psychedelics are active tools, syncretic tools, and they are part of a technology of the ecstasy that can be used paired with traditional practices, and it's perceived, even though, as a way to return to the tradition, to the forgotten heritage. But the third type is the most radical one, the acid Christians. So the one that thinks that psychedelics are the experience of the religion itself. Let's let them speak again. I spoke with God, or rather, I felt him within me. And it was just him and me for hours, feeling our mutual presence. I couldn't speak the whole afternoon. I've only taken them once since then. I feel that the place where they take you is somewhere you should only go if you're truly ready. You must not disturb God for your whims. And what I think is also interesting about this one is that these precise women never took psychedelics again, even though she thinks that it's the experience of speaking with God. So we can see how the believer can make a personal relationship with God, breaking all the institution, breaking all the dogma, and making a direct line with their spiritual self and their God. And they precisely reread the Bible differently. I have some examples that they gave me, some passages, the Isaiah visions of the temple, the burning bush, also Paul raptures to the third heaven. All of these passages from their ideas are clear example of psychedelic experience. Moving to an end, these are the last minutes that I take you. My main findings are that there is a qualitative difference between those who take psychedelics without faith and those who take them with faith, because they have a precise framework that translates their experience into their own dictionary that gave a deeper sense of sacred to their own experiences. So we can see how they can go together very well, psychedelics and spiritual life and research, because they carry within them a symbolic system that reactivates under the effect of substances. So we can read again, I feel this path has brought me closer to the essence of the Christian message more than years of catechesis. So, at the end of that very fast excursus, my conclusion are that psychedelics responds to the feeling of the sacred during these periods of disenchantment, so they can be the tool for acid Christian to reclaim through chemistry their contemplative heritage that the Church has forgotten. And also that therapeutic and mystical nature are inherently inseparable, because both neuroscientific reductionism and religious fundamentalism fail to give an answer to everything, and that we need a spiritual container to give a meaning to our experience, to have lasting fruits of our sense and the meaning that we can take from that. That was everything from me. I really thank you all for your attention. Hope I gave you some interesting insights. I want to thank you, the organizers, and also my third coach, Jörg. Thank you so much.